Imagine your bank has collapsed and suddenly shuts down. What happens to your money? Now imagine someone scams your grandmother and steals her life savings. Can that money be recovered? Now imagine someone tries to send money to a terrorist organization. Can that payment be stopped? Three completely different situations. Yet governments around the world believe a new form of money could change how all three are handled. It's called CBDC, Central Bank Digital Currency. Before we go any further, let's quickly clear up one thing. What exactly is a central bank? Think of a central bank as the institution responsible for a country's currency. In United States, that's Federal Reserve. In India, it's the Reserve Bank of India. In the UK, it's the Bank of England. When new money is created, central banks play a major role in that process. So when people talk about Central Bank Digital Currency, they are talking about digital money connected directly to the organization responsible for the country's currency. Some people believe CBDCs could make scams harder, reduce fake money, and improve how emergency support is delivered. Others worry governments having too much insight into people's spending. So what exactly is CBDC? And why are more than 100 countries exploring CBDCs? And if CBDCs become part of everyday life, what actually changes for you? Let's find out. Money has changed many times throughout history. For thousands of years, people used things like gold and silver. Then came paper money, then bank accounts, then cards, then online banking, and then mobile payments. Today, many people can go through an entire week without touching cash. Money keeps evolving. Think about your money today. Your salary probably arrives in a bank account. Your savings sit in a bank account. Your debit card and payment apps are connected to a bank account. In other words, banks sit right in the middle of how most of us use money. But what if there was another place you could keep money? Not replacing your bank account, not replacing cash, just another option. A national digital wallet connected to your country's CBDC system. A place to hold digital cash. Just like cash in your wallet, you don't need a banking app to use it. You don't need a payment company to approve it. That's probably the simplest way to think about CBDC. Cash, but in digital form. Now at this point, you might be thinking, why? Why are governments trying to build this? After all, most payments already work. You tap a card, scan a QR code, use an app, money moves. So what problem are they trying to solve? Let's start with one of the biggest, financial crime. Every year, billions of dollars move through scams, money laundering, terrorist financing, and organized crime. Governments spend enormous amounts of time and money trying to figure out where that money is going. Supporters of CBDC believe that if more money moves through traceable digital cash, some of these activities become harder to hide. Stolen money becomes easier to follow. Criminal networks become harder to fund, and fake money becomes much harder to circulate when every unit of digital cash can be verified electronically. Now let's be clear, nobody is claiming that crime will disappear. Criminals already use cash today, and if cash continues to exist, some illegal activity will continue to use cash. Supporters aren't arguing that crime disappears. They are arguing that more of the economy becomes easier to track than it is today, and many governments see that as a major advantage. Let's look at another example. Imagine a major earthquake hits a region. Thousands of families need help. Government wants to send financial support as quickly as possible. The challenge isn't always finding the money. Sometimes the challenge is making sure that right people receive it. Supporters believe CBDCs could help. The money could go directly to the people who need it. No lost checks and fewer fake claims. And because the money is digital, governments could verify where funds are going more accurately. Many people see that as a good thing. But there is a catch. The very things that make CBDCs attractive to some people are the same things that worry others. Let's go back to one of the examples from earlier. Imagine someone tricks your grandmother into sending away her life savings. A scam, the kind that steals billions of dollars every year. Supporters of CBDCs argue that if money becomes easier to trace, it may become easier to investigate where that money went. In some cases, it may even become easier to recover stolen funds. Many people hear that and think that sounds great, but then comes the obvious question. If money becomes easier to trace, who gets access to that information? The agency operating the CBDC system, the police investigating a crime, or tax authorities? Could future governments expand that access? Different countries are exploring different answers, and this is where opinions start to divide, because one person's security can be another person's privacy concern. Now, let's look at another feature that creates even more debate: programmable money. In simple terms, programmable money is a money that can come with rules attached to it. Rules about where it can be spent, or sometimes when it can be spent. Let's say a government provides food assistance. Most people would probably agree that food assistance should be used for food. You shouldn't be able to buy the latest iPhone with food stamps. That's where programmable money starts to make sense to many people. The money serves a specific purpose. But now imagine disaster relief money. Imagine two families receive exactly the same amount. One family uses it immediately. The other decides to save it. Now imagine that money expires after 6 months. Suddenly, the outcome is different because the money came with rules attached to it. And that's where people start disagreeing. Some people think that makes sense. Others think money shouldn't work that way. That's a lot of control to build into money, and that's why CBDCs create such strong reactions. It's not really a debate about technology. It's a debate about trust. How much trust should we place in the institutions managing money, and how much control should those institutions have? Now, let's go back to the very first question. Imagine your bank has collapsed and suddenly shuts down. What happens to your money? One of the ideas behind CBDCs is that they could give people another place to hold money. Think about your cash in your wallet. If your bank shuts down tomorrow, that cash is still yours. The idea behind a CBDC is similar. Instead of keeping all your money inside a bank account, you could also keep some digital cash in a CBDC wallet, a second place to keep digital money. Now imagine news breaks tomorrow morning that a major bank is in trouble. For the first time, people could choose between leaving their money in the bank or moving some of it into a CBDC wallet. And that's why banks are paying close attention to CBDCs, because banks don't just store money. They use deposits to fund mortgages, business loans, car loans, and credit cards. So if large amounts of money move into CBDC wallets, banks could have less money available to lend. If banks have less money available to lend, what happens to mortgages? What happens to business loans or car loans? These are some of the reasons central banks are moving carefully, because changing where money lives can affect how money flows through the entire economy. Now let's come back to another question. Imagine all your money is stored as digital cash. Then your phone gets stolen. What happens to your money? At first, that sounds terrifying, because when people hear the words digital cash, they often imagine the money sitting inside the phone itself. But that's not necessarily how CBDCs are expected to work. Think about your debit card. If you lose your debit card, the money doesn't disappear. The card is simply a way to access your account. A CBDC wallet could work in a similar way. Your phone becomes a way to access your digital cash, not necessarily the place where the money lives. So if your phone is lost, stolen, or damaged, your balance could be recovered through whatever security and identity systems the country chooses to implement. And in some ways, that creates an interesting advantage over physical cash. If you lose a physical wallet containing cash, recovering that money can be extremely difficult. But a digital system creates a possibility of recovery. Of course, the same feature that may help recover stolen money raises another question. If digital cash can be recovered, how much of it can be tracked? And once again, we are back to the same trade-off. More security, more convenience, but potentially less privacy. That's a balance every country will have to decide for itself. Now let's talk about cash. One of the biggest questions people ask is, will CBDCs replace cash? At least today, most central banks say no. The goal is to offer another option, not eliminate cash. And that makes sense because cash still does some things extremely well. You don't need internet, you don't need electricity, you don't need a phone. You can simply hand it to another person. Now you might be wondering, if cash continues to exist, won't criminals simply continue using cash? That's a fair question. And the honest answer is, some probably will. Supporters of CBDCs aren't arguing that crime disappears. They are arguing that if more of the economy moves through digital cash, more transactions become visible than they are today. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing depends on your perspective. Another common question is, what happens if internet goes down? Would CBDCs stop working? Not necessarily. Several CBDC projects around the world are experimenting with offline payments. The idea is simple. Your device could temporarily store a small amount of digital cash, just like your physical wallet stores a small amount of cash today. Two phones could then transfer that value using technologies such as NFC or Bluetooth. Later, when both devices reconnect to the internet, the transaction is synced with the wider CBDC system. Different countries are testing different approaches, but the goal is simple. Digital cash shouldn't stop working just because connectivity disappears. And that's important because if digital cash is going to live alongside physical cash, it needs to work in some of the situations where cash already works well. Now at this point, you might be thinking, this all sounds interesting, but is any of this actually happening? The answer is yes, and it's already happening in different parts of the world. Let's start with China. China has spent years testing its digital yuan, and instead of keeping the project inside labs and meeting rooms, it put it in hands of real people. In some pilot programs, consumers received digital yuan through public trials and were encouraged to spend it at participating stores. Imagine opening an app and finding digital money waiting for you to use. People bought food, shopped at local businesses, and made everyday purchases. The goal wasn't just to test the technology, it was to see how ordinary people would use digital cash in the real world. India is taking a different approach because India already has one of the world's most successful digital payment systems, UPI. Millions of people already use it every day. So India's challenge isn't teaching people how to make digital payments. People are already doing that. The question India is exploring is, where does a digital rupee fit into a world where digital payments are already extremely popular? And China and India aren't alone. The European Union is exploring digital euro. The United Kingdom is studying a digital pound. Countries such as the Bahamas, Jamaica, and Nigeria have already launched CBDCs. And around the world, more than 100 countries have explored, researched, tested, or developed CBDC projects in some form. So this isn't some distant future. The conversation is already happening right now. What's interesting is that many of the biggest arguments for CBDCs are also the biggest arguments against them. Making money easier to trace can help fight crime, but it can also raise privacy concerns. Making money easier to recover, can help victims of fraud, but it also means someone has to manage that system. Giving money rules can help ensure aid reaches the right purpose, but it also raises questions about who writes those rules. That's why this debate isn't as simple as CBDCs are good or CBDCs are bad. The real question is which trade-offs are we willing to accept? Because whether CBDCs succeed or fail, the decision being made today could influence how money works for decades. Not just for banks, not just for governments, but for all of us. For most of human history, money was something we carried. Now it's becoming something we interact through software. And that raises a question previous generations never had to ask. How much control should be built into money? Because the answer to that question may shape the next chapter of money itself. So here is my question for you. If you had to choose, would you prefer more privacy or more protection against fraud? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.